Hello out there and good morning traders. It is April 23rd, 2024, and welcome to the Apteros Daily Market Insight. So let's dive into what was going on yesterday. Yesterday we had a general line in the sand area right here, with this being the main zone that we were paying attention to for bearishness for scenario one, bullishness for scenario two. And I had mentioned or hinted in the post, as well as talked about this extensively with the student community, that I wouldn't be surprised if this bear area broke down to, yesterday. And what we ended up getting was some really amazing price action around this zone with scenario one. So scenario one, we come into the open, we start to see that selling pressure, continue a little bit, comes back up to test the highs, and then sells off right down into our first destination. So a really solid opportunity there with scenario one. After that, we started to really see the bulls react and rally in this market. And we came back up into scenario one here, where a decision was made. And essentially, we broke up through that zone, creating kind of a breakout scenario into scenario two. And then once we were in scenario two, depending on whether you're a day trader or someone that holds overnight, we ended up getting the exact play with scenario two that we were looking for overnight and into the open, the actual day's open, and the release coming in the overnight session. So what we ended up getting here was a really solid line in the sand situation from yesterday's trading, and we kind of had both scenarios really covered overall with our DMI yesterday. Scenario one was kind of the morning play, and then heading into the afternoon, the bulls really took control of the market and flipped that area into scenario two, where now we're a little bit more bullish in this market. So let's take a look at what's going on today. Okay, so now taking a look at what's going on today. Our main line in the sand is actually going to be higher. This is going to be our main line in the sand here today, where we're looking at bearishness from up above with scenario one and bullishness above that area if scenario two develops. But the main bulk of a lot of what's going on in the narrative and the context is actually down in this zone. We'll talk about that in just a second, but if we do end up seeing scenario two, it's kind of wide open space up here into the 5136 zone, which would be the overall target or destination if scenario two develops today. Without scenario two developing, we have some things to talk about here with scenario one. So ultimately, the fresher information is on the bullish side of things on our lower time frames. This move here shifted some lower time frames to being a little bit more bullish in terms of locations. So that's essentially the immediate pressure in the market right now. Now, this neutral zone here is going to be critical to that picture. In other words, if we hold this zone and just roll right back over, then we're going to be in kind of a rotational expectation overall in this market. If that neutral zone just holds above that, price continues to hold as we're seeing now and just pushes back up, then we get into our main line in the sand for the session, and we take a look at our overall scenarios, with scenario one being the hold and scenario two being the breakout, right? So that is kind of the game plan around what's happening in the immediate here and now picture on today's narrative and context. There's not a lot of precision, or not a lot for us to do right here in this zone. What we would really need to see is this area here make a decision. If it breaks up above, then we're waiting for our test of our line in the sand. If it holds and rolls over and accepts down below, then we're looking at, okay, this becomes a little bit more of a bearish location. We have neutral locations along the way with an overall destination down below. So I have to put out these preps with, kind of stagnant ideas, because you guys don't get to see the developing market conditions that we do as NADRO students, right? So that's the general idea, is this neutral zone, if it holds, becomes more bullish, right? It becomes more bullish up above, even coming into our line in the sand. So if we get up into this line in the sand area here, and scenario one starts to develop, and we start to see the roll back into this zone, technically this neutral zone becomes more bullish because of the way in which we've pushed out into this area. So we have to be cognizant of that on the downside with scenario one. So this neutral zone would become a target destination as well for scenario one. And then, of course, if we get a continuation of the downside, that would be extra on the table, that kind of thing. So overall, I know it's a difficult landscape in terms of scenarios today, so I'll just kind of clean this all up. Our main line in the sand is this higher one, right? Scenario one is that hold below it. Scenario two is that hold above it. With scenario two, there's a target up above here at the 36s. Is that where it was? Yeah, the 36 area, 5136. With scenario one, your first target is going to be coming back into this neutral zone here, and that's going to be somewhere to pay attention to. If that neutral zone breaks down, we continue to see movement lower, then you're looking at these neutral destinations coming down into this bullish zone here. Okay, so that's kind of the overall landscape what we're seeing with scenario one. But in between, this is really a touchy area for us. In between the line in the sand and this neutral reference, if this market continues to rally up into that main line in the sand area. So it's kind of back and forth there between bullish pressure and some bearish pressure here. All right. Overall, that's the general landscape what we're seeing in today's context. It's not as straightforward as we had yesterday or even the day before that, right? Where we had a pretty clear expectation around what would happen if the market was shifting and not. So we're in a little bit more of a nebulous zone at this point. And unfortunately, these public DMIs, you don't get to see the things changing and evolving that we do as the student community does. So what we're really talking about here is as things go higher, things are going to shift to be a little bit more bullish on lower time frames. That's fine. This area here is really the area where we kind of remain overall rotational in the structural picture of this market. In other words, just based on value and profiling and things like that. If we hold below, that stuff kind of continues. If we break out above, then we start seeing, old value areas being tested as we continue to move higher, along with an upper time frame that has a bearish condition that creates this particular line in the sand, right? So a good line in the sand usually has meaning or implications to multiple time frames in our NADRO framework, and this area is one of those type of areas. Whereas down below here, this particular zone really is more focused on one time frame. And if we hold above it, we head into this neutral area. Let me clean up some of these drawings. We head into this neutral area. If we hold above it, we head back into this line in the sand where we're testing multiple time frames, right? And of course, if we get below it, then this one, reference or this one time frame starts to support a more bearish outlook as well, along with our upper line in the sand zone. So that's kind of the overall landscape around these two areas in general. So you can kind of treat this neutral zone a little bit more like a line in the sand, but it's neutral due to the fact that really our main trade ideas are a little bit higher, and the main multiple time frame test is up above. All right, trade well out there, mind your process, and let's get after it.